All right. What is up, everybody? Thanks a lot for joining us or checking out this video. So yeah, we've got the stay-at-home order going on. We have the coronavirus thing going on right here in Indianapolis and all over the world. And yeah, so we cannot do our meetup tonight. So Brett and I, actually, luckily for us anyway, it was just basically a topic where I was going to interview him, and we're going to talk about starting, building, and scaling a wholesale business. So we can do that just on Zoom right here. So that's what we'll do tonight, and we're recording this and everything like that. So we will put it on our Facebook group at Wholesaling Made Simple. So you guys will be able to find it on there. If you guys have any questions, anything you want to learn, anything that you don't understand, just feel free to reach out. You can comment on it. Let us know whatever you need, and then we'll do a follow up the next week just to answer any of the questions, or just to follow up with anything that you guys need and give you guys any resources that we talk about. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So I got Brett Snodgrass here, and Brett, if anybody that's been to our meetup before, they know a little bit about your story. So you started off kind of doing basically being a bird dog for someone that was looking for land down in southern Indiana. You and your dad ended up finding this house on eBay for $9,000 over in Youngstown, Ohio. You had $5,000. Your dad had $5,000. You went and bought it together. Didn't have any money to fix it up or anything, to know what you're going to do with it, so you just went ahead and sold it, and you made a profit on it. So you're like, oh, well, so you were wholesaling before you knew what wholesaling was, before it was cool or anything like that. So that was your story, and that's kind of how you got started. But let's take it from there. Like, what happened next, and really just kind of how did you get into like, oh, I think I could do this. I think I could make a business out of this, and really, what did you get into then?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've just always kind of the light bulb went off when I made that profit on that very first deal. And so honestly, I went back home and I just tried to do that exact same thing. So you always remember your first deal. It's hard to remember the second deal or the third deal or the thousands after that. But I believe I went back home and I did the same thing. Actually, I remember we bought in Youngstown, I think maybe 3 or 4 houses. Actually, I think the exact same way. I went back on eBay and did a couple other deals, made same amount of type of money, $3,000 to $5,000 on each one. And then, but I didn't know much about Ohio, and I didn't, I couldn't really find much on like online about eBay in Indianapolis, where I was close to, or some of the other cities around. So I remember I started looking on the MLS. Actually, I started looking on, and I didn't even know what the MLS was. So I was looking on like Realtor.com, and I don't even know some of the other websites back then, but started looking at deals on a lot of REO deals, and realized that there were some cheap deals on the MLS. And I just wanted to make offers. And I knew that if I made enough offers, that it was a numbers game, that if I made enough offers, that some of them would stick, and that I would be able to make some money on those ones that stuck. But I didn't have a realtor's license, so I couldn't make offers on the MLS. So I remember I started joining networking groups, and I was living down in Bloomington, Indiana at that time. And there was a networking group called Rainmakers. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's a networking group called Rainmakers. And I remember I went to this group, and I met a lady. There was a speed networking thing where we'd go like and date business, like, tell each other about our businesses. And I remember I met this lady, and I actually don't even remember her name. Made her a lot of money, but don't remember her name. But she was a real estate agent, and I had never done this before. And she probably thought this was a harebrained idea, but I just said, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to give you a spreadsheet of like 30 properties that are listed on the MLS, and I'm going to offer on all of them. And we're not going to hardly get any of them, but we're going to get a few. And you'll make commissions on all those properties. And you'll probably do 100 offers a month or 200 offers a month. And she thought it was the weirdest thing, but she said, okay. So I started working with her, and that's exactly what we did. I would send her a spreadsheet every week. Me and Dad, we'd go look at all these houses. I'd have my GPS in. I'd be plugging it in, and I'd program all the addresses in on the Garmin the night before. We would drive out, snow, rain, didn't matter, didn't care. We'd go and he'd look in all the windows, and didn't even get into houses. Like, we weren't even agents. I was looking in the windows and like, oh, this looks good. Let's offer $5,000. And I'd send them over to our agent. She'd offer on all of them, and it worked. It's like, we'd offer 20 offers and we get 2, right? 10% of them. And we started making money off of those. And then literally in 2008, when everyone else had run for the hills, we did 158 deals that way, sending in hundreds of offers, all REO bank-owned properties, and just made it a business out of this. And I'd never seen any type of money like that. I'm come from teaching, used to making 20 grand a year, 30 grand a year, and 158 deals. I don't even know how much we made. I didn't track our numbers back then very well. But I'm going to say we probably made 5,000 a deal, something like that. And that was a lot of money. so yeah, that's how we got started.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So what made you want to go from it then of like realizing like, hey, I have a business here. I can do this. 'Cause at that time, nobody was really educating people on that. Nobody that wasn't like, you couldn't get on YouTube and just learn how to wholesale, and there wasn't a course for it and all those things. That wasn't around, back then, or very few people were really doing it. So what made you kind of realize like, hey, I have something here. I can make a living off of this. And then kind of what, after you kind of came to that realization, what were those next steps and what did you do?
Yeah. And it's hard because I honestly didn't even know what I was doing, number one. And I know that's, some people are like, that's easy for you to say now. But honestly, when I take myself back to the first couple of years, I didn't really know what we were doing. And if someone asked me what we were doing, I honestly probably would have said, I don't really know. We're making a lot of offers and we're getting deals and we're selling them for 5,000 more than what we offer and that's what we do. And it was the simplest thing in the world, right? I mean, if I said, Brian, pick 200 houses on the MLS, the cheapest houses on the MLS, the 200 cheapest houses, right? I want you to lowball every one of them. You're going to get 10% of them and you'll make $5,000 a piece and you'll sell them. And it was like just a simple business, right? And that's exactly kind of what we do today. So I don't think the first couple of years I really thought that we had a business. I don't think Dad understood exactly what we were doing. But he did buy into it because he retired from teaching. And, he, came with me, and we did that business for 5-6 years, and that's exactly what we did. And I did track some of the numbers that number one, that agent that we were working with, I tracked her numbers in 2008, and I was like, oh my goodness, and I started adding up all her commissions that she made off of all of our deals. And she made a lot of money. I think it was 70, 80, and these weren't high commission dollar houses. She was making 500 a house, 600 a house, So she was, I think she made 70, 80K that year off of us. And I'm used to, substitute teaching. And I was like, man, that's a lot of money. So I need to go get my license. So that's when I took the class, and I was like, hey, I can do what she was doing. And I did it myself, honestly. I'd be the one putting the offers and making those commissions, because banks, they don't care if it's you buying it or another agent, they still pay you the commissions. So we saved that money. And then I was an agent, still doing the same thing until probably, I'm going to say probably about 2012 is when it wasn't working that well. So we started going to different markets too. I went down to Florida, and that was a lot of fun. I was buying houses in Fort Myers and Lehigh Acres, and I was single at the time, so I'd be flying down every 2 weeks to Florida, just hanging out, just looking at houses. Like it was, I don't know, it was like the bachelor's dream. So it was pretty cool.
So that's awesome. So then you got to 2012, and then when let's just get into that real quick of like, so why wasn't that working anymore? Like, why wasn't that strategy working with just kind of what was going on? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the market just kind of started bouncing back, drying up. There wasn't that many REOs. It started to be more competitive. I mean, literally 2008 to 2011, it wasn't that competitive. Not many people were doing what we were doing. But by the time 2012 rolled around, it started catching on. People started, making offers. And so the market started drying up. We couldn't buy that many REOs again. And how we were, selling them, a lot of things just started getting more competitive. Prices were going up. So, I mean, I was used to paying $5K for properties. Now I'm paying like $18K, and I'm like, oh, that's way too much money, So all these things started happening. And so that's when we finally got a house. It was in Oaklandon, which is just north of Indy. And we bought it for $29,000. And I wasn't very good at rehab, and I didn't know how to estimate rehab very well because I've never educated myself. I never took any courses. There wasn't anything really out there for me. And if there was, I didn't care. I was just winging everything, which isn't the best way. But I said, Dad, we should fix this up. This is, it was in $120,000 neighborhood, I thought. And I said, we should just fix it up. Let's rehab it. Let's just try to flip this thing. So, and I said, I think it needs about, I don't know, $25,000. That's what I said. And that's when Les doing the work. So I remember Dad, he was putting in cabinets. Mom, she was coming over. She was putting up, the baseboards, and I'm sanding the floors and up till midnight. And it was a crazy experience. And we were hiring things out, siding and all this stuff. And that 25,000 that I thought ended up being like 69,000, by the way. And we had about 90 some thousand in it. And we ended up selling for like 125, something like that. And we made, by the time it was all said and done, we probably made 20. I don't know, something like that. So that was our first flip, honestly. And then, but 20K, that was a lot of money because here I am, I'm used to making like 4, right? So at that time I was like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but let's just do it again. So that's when the era of flipping started. From 2012, 2015, we were just flipping everything. And we probably did, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 houses a year, I'd say, off of flipping.
Yeah. So let me go back to that deal. Like when you made that 20 grand on that house, when you're flipping it, did it occur to you oh man, I can do, I had to spend 3 months to make that, 20 grand versus oh, I could have done 10 houses at 4 grand and made 40 in that same amount of time or whatever. Did that light bulb go off at that point, or was that was just later that you're like, okay, I just want to focus on the wholesaling part of it?
The light bulb went off where it was a lot of work. Yes. But I didn't educate myself, number one, and I didn't know how to wholesale. I only knew how to make offers on the MLS, get them under contract, buy them, and then sell them. That's the only thing I knew how to do. I never studied letters. I never studied PPC, never studied any of that stuff at that time. So in my mind, I had to do this or else, because the other stuff wasn't working anymore. And that's why.
So let's talk about that then. So when did that happen because you got to that point where hey, I don't like being a landlord. I don't like flipping houses. I don't want to do the work. I just want to focus on wholesaling. And so when you made that decision, and that was what, about 6 years ago now or so?
That was about 2015. I mean, I kind of had it in my mind, I think in 2014, but really things started in 2015 when I really made that transition.
So when you made that transition and said, hey, I'm only going to focus on wholesaling because I like the transactional part of it. You like the competitiveness of it and that kind of piece of it. So what were you doing then to get deals? So were you just all trying to find them on the MLS, or how did that strategy change up for you?
Yeah. So yeah, again, that's really the only thing I knew how to do. So I did go back to the MLS, tried that for a while, and that worked some. I would try to buy HUD properties, get on the HUD home store, and I got a few deals off of that, and that worked, but definitely could not scale it. It's not a scalable business. You can do 1 or 2 deals a month with that, but it's not a scalable business. But really what changed for me was when I started educating myself. Number one, I got on to biggerpockets.com, and back then, and there still is a lot of forums and things you can read about and blogs. And I started reading about different strategies. And I remember this lady from California told me about this mail strategy and postcard strategy. And she was telling me about it, but I didn't understand it at all. It reminded me, honestly, of college when I think I signed up for some stuffing envelope course, where you can make a quarter an envelope, something like that. But I didn't really understand it. But then it's funny how when you hear something 3 or 4 or 5 times, it starts registering. And I had a guy reach out to me on Bigger Pockets, and he wanted me to mentor him. So I started doing that a little bit and started doing some deals with him. And then that's when I started figuring out this direct mail thing, and I met one of my friends for breakfast one day, and I told him, I said, "Hey, I heard about this direct mail thing. Do you want to write some letters and mail them out to sellers, and maybe we can buy their houses?" I don't know. And it was really interesting because it was very similar to what I had been doing. It was just different, right? Instead of making offers on the MLS and looking at MLS deals and agent deals, you were looking at private people's deals. It was the same thing. You just had to talk to more people a little bit and a little bit different. So we started doing that, and I spent $1,000 and we did a deal. And I was like, oh wow, because we were making, I don't know, 6,000-7,000 a deal, 8,000 a deal off of those. So in my mind, again, the light bulb registered, and I was like, okay, I put in 1,000 and I make 7. Like, how many $1,000 should I put in? Like, all of it, right? So we started doing that, and just started doing direct mail, and then that's when all these kind of other strategies kind of came to mind too.
Yeah. So let's talk about, so you had that one person that you hired on and basically like kind of write those letters and stuff for you. That was your first hire. What were some of those other first hires that you kind of, as you started building that business then and building Simple Wholesaling, what were some of those other first hires you kind of brought on and what were they doing? The follow up to that is going to be like, how would you do it differently? Would you have hired to do different things differently and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, in just my personality is I'm just kind of a willy-nilly kind of guy, and didn't have any process or system to any of it, honestly. So my very first hire was a gentleman, and that was his first job. He wrote letters for me. That was the only thing he did. And he would complain about his hand cramping up, and had to write all these letters. That was my very first hire. And then I met this other guy named Tyler out of Anderson, and he actually bought one of my HUD properties. So I bought a property off of the HUD home store, and I sold it to him in Anderson. And I think we made like $5,000. And so we started building that relationship. He was a gunslinger, and he'd call me up like every couple months, just asking me really weird questions. And I was an agent too, and he wanted to sell one of his flips. So I helped him buy a flip property, and he sold it. And we just kind of built this relationship, but he'd always talk about hating his job, and he was in a sales trucking shipping company or something like that. And I said, well, I mean, I don't know, like, you could work for me, I guess. I mean, I'm doing this business. And that was a big paycheck to write, number one, because he says, well, I need to make this amount of money. And I had never paid someone that. I mean, for me, like $10 an hour to pay someone, that's a lot of money, because I just wasn't used to it, right? So he needed a certain amount of money to live and support his family. But I hired him. He was an acquisitions manager, so he would help me look at all the properties, take all the phone calls, and do all that. So I had a guy writing the letters, and then an acquisitions manager after that. And then my third hire was kind of a content guy. I mean, I was really wanting to brand our company. I created this name, Simple Wholesaling, and kind of had this idea where I wanted to brand and be kind of a wholesaling expert, kinda. And I had a guy that moved to Indy, and his name was Jaron, and he helped with content, blogs, and he helped create the podcast that we do. It was a Simple Wholesaling podcast. Now it's our Real Estate Investing with a Purpose podcast. So that was my next hire after that. So, and then it just kind of snowballed after that. Honestly, I hired, didn't really think about it much. I just met people, and I hired them based on what I thought of them.
So knowing what you do now, how would you go about that differently? So when people are because people are in that definitely, people that are you can come into our meetup every week. They're in that situation of like, hey, I'm starting to do some deals now, and I'm ready to kind of hire somebody underneath me or 2 people underneath me and stuff like that. So what's your advice to them on how they should structure that first couple of hires? How should they go about that, and what should they be maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would do it a lot differently. The one thing I think that from when I started, even up until now, so we're going through something that I've never been through before. I don't think no one's been through this before, right? People have been through the 2008, but I got into it right at the bottom, right? So these last 12, 13 years, I've been in it's just been icing, honestly. Like the market's just kind of gone up constantly. Areas have gotten better. They've exploded. And I remember Jason Medley in our mastermind group saying the market, it hides our mistakes, right? And I think for me, that happened. And I hired people and they probably weren't always the right fit, but the market hit all that, right? So we could still make money at the end of the day based on that. But if I could do it over again, and what I would really recommend is to have some sort of process with your hiring. What we do now is I honestly, I ask for referrals. I think some of the best hires have came from referrals, because that person, that friend of yours, or that business associate of yours, is putting their neck on the line for that referral. But there's always some sort of process. We do a personality test with them. Typically it's a disc test. That's our first thing. I have them send a video of, and I ask them certain questions on that. We usually do a couple of different interviews. And then we even have like a trial period, because a lot of times people are putting their best foot forward and they're saying all the right things, and you can see like a glimpse, like it's an iceberg, right? So you can see like 10% of who they really are, but you don't see 90% of it. Do they show up every day? Do they really have integrity? Yeah, they say they do, but do they really have integrity? Um, are they going to meet your core values? What's their work ethic like? So we put a lot of people on a trial period of 30 days and say, hey, let's just try this for a month. Sometimes it's longer than that. And let's just see how it works out. Here's some leads, call them, and let's see how you do. So that's how I do it now. You can even go a lot deeper than that by hiring out and outsourcing some of your hiring. We've talked about that a little bit. You can go a lot deeper. So I don't feel like I have it nailed. We don't always hire right. Brian, I know that we've been through that. We've not always hired correctly, and we've had to make some decisions based on that, but I've gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of jumping on kind of what you're saying there. I think when it does come to hiring those certain people, by giving something we have started doing, and we're doing a lot better now, putting them through a trial period for a certain amount of time, and hey, let's try 30 days, then we'll try 60 days, and then like, okay, let's make this kind of a full-time thing, keep going. I think that's crucial, because when those hires are not the right people, man, especially being an entrepreneur and being kind of new as a business leader and kind of the head of a company and stuff like that, it's tough to let people go. It's tough to have that conversation like, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna be able to keep you on. And that's a really tough thing. So that's why it's so critical and so important, not just for the business, but even just for that relationship and moving forward, of making sure those are the right hires and stuff like that. So it's definitely a tough thing when you have to go through that and stuff. But
And
it's also
typically, if you can go through that process and spend some time doing that, that it's going to be so well worth it. Because if you hire the right person, everything else is smoother. Everything else is just easier for you. There's less training that person. There's less coaching that person. There's all of these things, these frustrations that are a little bit less. If you hire the wrong person, it's almost like, and it's even worse than this. It's like if you buy a good deal, it's pretty easy to sell that good deal. People want it. It's like you don't even have to have that much effort into it. You make the presentation, you send it out, somebody buys it, you close on it. That's it, right? If you buy a bad deal, it's not just the money, it's the headaches, it's the effort, it's the thinking about it, it's the coming back to it every month or every week and be like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with this deal? It's just sitting there on the back burner and I don't even know what to do, and I don't even want to think about it anymore. And that's what it is times 10 with a person. Right? So really and it's hard to train them. And I was talking to a guy on my podcast earlier that it's like when he would hire the right person versus the wrong person, the training, typically, even if he trained them hard, they would spend so much money and effort on training. A lot of times the underperformer would still be an underperformer and the high performer would still be a high performer. The training didn't matter, honestly, that much. So the person is crucial.
yeah. So let's get into a little bit kind of dig into that a little bit deeper on just like, so somebody's in that situation where they are ready to hire that first one or two people. How do they know what to hire for? Like, is it like, oh, do I always hire for acquisitions first or whatever? Like, what's your guidance on that?
Yeah, I think it's just you have to figure out your gifts, number one, and what you like doing and what you're gifted at, um, and stick with that. And everyone is wired differently. Their brains are wired a little bit differently. So I'm gifted at certain things that Brian is not gifted at, maybe, or he's not gifted as much at, and he's gifted at things that I'm not gifted at. So I just kind of do a self assessment, a self awareness on what do I enjoy doing. What, like, if I was living my perfect business, what would I be doing, right? And a lot of times it's doing this sort of stuff, honestly. So I would just do that self-assessment first, and then the things that you're not gifted at or the things you don't like, I would start there. Um, and you know, and then make sure you're putting, like I said, the right people in the right seats. So for me, it was talking on the phone and acquisitions and all that. I hired my first guy just to write the letters, but I didn't have to do that. But the second hire was talking on the phone, the acquisitions. I didn't like that stuff, and I wasn't that good at it. So that was my first hire. But you might love that. I've talked to other entrepreneurs. They're saying, man, I don't want to give that up. I love looking at houses and doing appointments and negotiating with sellers. That's what I live for. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't have to do that. You could hire out the administrative piece. Maybe you're not good at the details and you need someone to help you with the closings, right? Scheduling all the paperwork. And as soon as you get a deal, send them the purchase agreement, send it to the title company, closing the deal, coordinate everything. Maybe you need a dispositions manager. If you love talking to sellers, but you don't want to spend time building your buyers list, then you need someone that loves talking to investors and loves talking to high type A driven individuals, right? There's a difference there. So I would just start with what you're not gifted at and what you don't like.
Yeah, I think it's one thing too. Just like when you're hiring and stuff like that, if you have that certain thing that like maybe you're not, maybe it's something you don't like to do, or maybe something you're not quite as good at. Just you want to just have that mindset of like, man, I want to hire somebody that's going to be better than me at that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best places to start, of knowing that. So let's get into, so kind of, man, we're just into, heard a little about your start and just kind of how you kind of built this, how it came apart and stuff like that. But let's get into a little bit more of kind of what you are doing now, what your role is, and like how you've kind of scaled this into being, one of the biggest wholesale companies here in Indianapolis and kind of nationwide as well. Kind of having this brand and kind of what your role is inside of that, and just kind of advice that we have for people like kind of moving forward that are ready to scale that and make that step.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go through some things here that, some of them might register, some of them won't. And then I have some things just to kind of tell you guys, just to be real, I guess, a little bit vulnerable maybe, of where I'm at now compared to, what it was before. But one book that I always recommend is a couple of books here. Just going to grab them. Is these two books here. So I got this book, Traction. This is a great book about really how to run your business, and I wish that I would have read this book earlier. And there's actually a smaller book that goes with it. It's called What the Heck is EOS? And EOS is called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And this basically is for any business, and it really registers with me. It's very simple and easy to read. I really recommend you guys getting those two books, What the Heck is EOS and Traction. They're very similar, but maybe start with this one. It's a little bit easier to break down. But it really just talks about your business as a puzzle. And it's trying to put all these pieces together. And the first thing is the vision, right? And I'm probably more of a visionary, honestly. I love ideas. I love to cast vision. I love to make goals, and I love to try to achieve those goals. And how are we going to do it? That's the vision. And so what that just entails is we have a vision board We have a one-page vision plan that kind of just lays out our business. We call it the one-page plan. And Brian and I talk about it all the time. We bring it up once a quarter. We even took a vision trip this last year, outlining this one-page plan and what are we going to accomplish the next 10 years, 30 years, 1 year, 3 months, and you break it all down that way, because it's hard to think about where you're going to be at in 10 years. And the vision plan is always changing, right? Because your lives change, right? Maybe you have a couple of kids next year and now your vision has changed a little bit, right? So, but that's the first thing, coming up with your plan and coming up with your vision. The next thing is the systems and processes. And this is where Brian really comes in. This is why he's a lot better at this than I am, about developing some sort of process and system. So the difference between the one-man band entrepreneur and the person that wants to scale their business um, is basically that the first thing that they want to do is they're going to go from working in their business to working on their business. And the only way to do that is to go from not doing, but to teaching people how to do. So it actually turns, like I used to play basketball, for example, and I used to play basketball, right? I played on teams and things like that. Well, I see a lot of basketball players go from being a player, you're playing in the game, to then being a coach, right? And that's kind of what this is basically. So I used to play in the game all the time, used to talk to the sellers and do the deals, but now I'm coaching and I'm recruiting. And I think that that's like my main thing that I can help do is I can come up with the vision. Number one, that's like the biggest thing for me probably is the ideas and the vision and casting that out. But one of the things that I do is I do help coach and I help recruit. So I'm always recruiting talent and then coaching them to bring them up to a level. And then Brian, honestly, it takes them over and helps manage and keeps them accountable after that. Right. So I'm kind of like that college recruiter. But in order to do that, you have to develop some sort of system and process. So with that, we create a lot of videos, with technology these days. You can do screen shares, you can do Zoom calls. And that comes in so handy with all this training and coaching and systems that everything that I do now, I always think, should I be doing this? And if I shouldn't, how do I teach someone else how to do it? And I always think about that. So I'm always doing these little videos and screen shares, stuff like that.
Hang on
We
real
talk,
quick. I want to
yeah,
point that out. I want to go a little bit deeper into that because I think it's very important for people to understand and hopefully realize. Because I know I always kind of had to come around to that a little bit more. Whereas I don't know, I'm just like a frugal person, and I always think like, oh, I can do things a little bit better. I always want things done my way, like I kind of think too. But I came to realize of like, man, the time I spend on this, it was more valuable for me to spend my time elsewhere. And it's okay for me to give this up and have somebody else do it. Or, hey, we need to hire a virtual assistant to do this, or we need to hire another team member to do this because your talents or my talents are better spent on something else. Even though I can do this, I can do this really well, I don't need to be doing this. So I think it's
yeah,
really important for people to realize as they are growing and as they are scaling their business, realizing where they're most valuable within what they're doing day to day.
yeah. No, definitely. I totally agree. I mean, one thing that my dad, he was one of the biggest ones. He came, he was a teaching background and he was a very frugal person. And he had always had that mentality on why would we hire this out when we can just do it ourselves? And I was always under the impression, why would I do this if I can hire someone to do it for $10 an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's always my thing, because not saying I'm anything at all, but I would always say, I feel like that I can do something more valuable than $10 an hour. And I think that I can, that if I look at my hours and how much that I make or the business makes, that it adds up to be more than that. Right. So that's just something that I'm always asking, myself. And the other thing is it's, and this is something that I want to talk to Brian about. We can talk about it now too. But, Brian, I think that you say all the time too, is that this task only takes me 20 seconds, right? And typically I know it does take longer than that, but let's say that 20 seconds really is like 6 minutes. I don't know. But for me, it's the brain shift. And And that's what I have to realize. And if you really study like the brain and how much time it really takes you to shift from one task to the next, it it actually takes a lot longer than that because I have to shift my focus, right? Um, and that's just one thing as you're running your companies is don't only think about how long it takes too, but think about how long it's your distraction, it's your focus. I'm like, you have to take your attention off this like really intense thing that you should be doing to do this one little thing. It's not going to take very much time, but to get back to this really intense thing, it's a shift and it does take your distraction away. Then you get back to this thing and you're like, you're not even in it anymore. And you're like, I didn't know what I was doing. Right. And I don't know. That's just some things I always think about. So
Yeah, definitely.
I was a
And
tangent.
let's talk about this too. So when we're talking about your job of like where you are right now and where you've scaled this business to this point is you're talking about recruiting. When you're talking about recruiting, you're not just talking about recruiting like that next person that's going to join our team or whatever. You have to constantly be recruiting lenders, people that you're working with. Am I working with the right title companies? Am I working with the right lawyers and stuff? And we kind of team up on some of that stuff. But when you're talking about, and that's something I always kind of in my role, that's where I'm always kind of pushing you at because you oversee this part of it of with the lenders of like where it's always kind of be you got to recruiting more lenders because hey, if all your lenders are lending at 10, where are the lenders, Brett, that can lend at 9? Where are the lenders that can lend at 8? So you can always be doing that, always be pushing yourself, and that's kind of one of the things that you're overseeing, and that's kind of on that scale business of you're overseeing that for our company right now.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at all your relationships, and it's not just about the money, the bottom line. You got to look at some different things, but you got to be aware, right? And I remember Brian and I went through this budget and all of our expenses, and I just really recommend you guys that if you're in this business, making sure you're keeping track of your numbers, your data, how much money you're spending, you need to go through that each month. I've been doing this 12, 13 years, and right now the budget data that we're looking at is deeper than I've ever looked at it in the history of this business. And that's not a good thing, honestly. So you really need to be looking at your numbers and figuring out how can I be better or how can I reduce my expenses or is this relationship um, worth what we're doing here. And some examples are, clean out crews for us. I mean, we were spending a lot of money on clean out crews and, we were having someone kind of oversee that and really looking at the numbers. We felt like, man, feel like we're wasting a lot of money on this. Can we be better at it? Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but at least let's just give it a shot. We're talking to the title companies about, hey, what are your closing costs? Like, when I see that HUD statement, I see a lot of numbers and I don't know what they mean. And if I don't, I'm sure that you guys don't, right? So like, I want to know kind of what they mean. What are they for? Because they can throw some numbers in there that I want to know like, what is the cost? So I started asking them, hey, what's the average cost on, if we buy a $50,000 property, what is it? So now we know. So now when they send us the HUD, if it's supposed to be $900, and it's $1,000, we say, hey, this was supposed to be 9. If it's 1,000, tell me why. And we just start, trying to keep people accountable. But there's 100 things that you can do just like that. So knowing your data is another thing that is super crucial to what you're doing.
Yeah, just make sure you're tracking all that stuff and knowing those numbers and things like that. That's part of making sure that as you're scaling, bringing people on the team that you can have those conversations with and open up about. And I kind of revert back to one of the stories I have about my like teaching career. Of I went from a public school in Ohio where I had multiple math teachers that taught kind of in the same area, so we could have conversations. We could be on the same page and things like that. When I moved out here to Indiana, I was in a Catholic school and I was the only math teacher that taught in the middle school. So I couldn't have anybody that spoke the same language as me. And my teaching kind of it was still okay, but it suffered because of that because I wasn't stimulating my mind as much as I could. And then when you're hiring people, when you're bringing people on, make sure you bring people on that can challenge you, that you can have the conversations with. They can be real with you. You can have tough conversations, but you can also speak the same language to where you guys can really get what your vision is. You can all accomplish that. Make sure everybody's on the same page with that. And Brett, we got a few minutes left before we wrap this up and things. I want you to kind of focus on when you are, you're starting your business and you're coming up with that vision and you are building that business and you are you're scaling the business and you're bringing people on and stuff like that, how important it is to everybody be reaching for that same vision and have those same core values of how important that is to the success of your business when you're scaling it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. So when I started working with a coach, we talked about core values, and that sounds kind of like hokey on core values, and I kind of thought was at first, but coming up with them, it was really crucial. And you don't need a lot. We have five, so ours is basically be a faithful servant, be mission minded, leaving a lasting impression, simple and smart systems, and enjoy the ride. They're kind of like unique to us, but it's really crucial to everyone kind of gels to that, because if someone starts to break your core values, then it's a no-brainer, right? You're not really going to be a part of the team anymore. It doesn't matter how much money you make and all that. But if everyone has those core values and they all come together, it also presents a really great culture, because you all have the same values. You're all there for a good reason. You don't have a lot of selfish people on the team. People put the team first. And kind of, again, back to the sports world, if you ever played on sports teams, you probably remember certain teams that you guys just gelled well. Maybe you didn't have the best players in the world, but you guys won a lot of games because you played really well together. And those are really fun teams to be on. But you can also remember teams that you probably had a really selfish guy on the team that all he cared about was himself, and he shot the ball all the time, if it was basketball, and you didn't like being on that team, right? And so what's cool about this business is you don't, if you own the business, you don't have to have that guy on the team, right? You can have a team that sticks to your core values, and that's really important. So I don't even care if it's just you. Let's say you don't even have a team. Coming up with those values are really important, because for me as a visionary, I actually had this conversation with one of our financial team members yesterday, and I was thinking about decisions to be making and something like that. And like, I'm thinking 3 years down the road, like right now with everything going on, we got to start thinking a little bit about right now. But typically I'm thinking 2, 3 years down the road. I'm like, okay, like there's certain decisions that I don't want to have to deal with 3 years down the road. So you got to make them right now. Um, so yeah, I don't have to answer your question. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
You're good. So no, just the importance of making sure you're bringing people on, or you have those core values, and you're starting with yourself and what is important to you. Because whether it's your team members or the people that you're working with, your contractors, your title companies, your lawyers, your just people that are your buyers, even and stuff like that. We've not sold properties to people before because we had different core values and stuff, and that happens sometimes. So knowing what they are and just how important that is to your business and stuff. So, but Brett, we are out of time now, my man. So I can give you one more minute if you have just any kind of like last words to kind of sum up, just any last advice on someone that's kind of in that business. They've started their business, but they're ready to kind of scale it a little bit. What's that kind of piece of advice you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, just some of the things that we talked about: cast your vision, build some sort of simple process. Doesn't have to be super fancy. It could just be a video that you create on your computer and, some words, instructions. Recruiting people are probably the most important thing. If you get a good person in the right seat, you don't have to train them that hard. They're internally already motivated, and they're going to do a decent job for you. Your job is to train and coach. So just be thinking about that, and just put the puzzle together. And I'll just kind of leave you with this. A lot of people think that just because you own a business, you have a good team, you're doing a lot of money, it's all perfect, it's all rainbows and things like that. But we have an amazing business. I love our team, and things are going really, really well. But the vision for you has to be your vision. It can't be anybody else's vision. It has to be your vision. And some people don't, they think they want a big business, but honestly, they might not, right? Maybe that's not your vision. So bigger is not always better. I will kind of say that. It brings just different challenges, right? So when it was just me, I was just feeding my own mouth and food and my own family and things like that. But now we have multiple mouths to feed, and we have to do so many deals to feed them, right? So it's not always better, but it does give you a lot of options. So now, yeah, we have a scale business, and I do have more options than I did before, and it is pretty cool. And I'd love to help out anyone who is interested in scaling their business, or I can give you the right resources and people to talk to help you guys out. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. And so this is a little different than, of course, our usual meetup because we're usually in person and we'd be able to talk and have, answer questions from you guys right away. So we're going to do this a little differently. So basically, if you guys, I'm going to, post this on the Facebook group. If you guys have any questions, you can put them on there. You can reach out to myself or Brett at brian@simplewholesaling.com or brett@simplewholesaling.com. Ask any questions you have. And what we'll do next Wednesday, Brett and I are going to jump on kind of the same thing, and we're going to answer all those questions. Just basically put together as another video and have those questions for anybody that has anything that they want to know, whether it's about, Brett starting the business, building it up, how to scale, any of that stuff you guys want to know. More than happy to help out. But thanks a lot. That's a wrap for tonight. Take care.